Everybody. I don't think I had, I used up 2 stupid jokes yesterday, so I don't know that I have my stupid joke of the day. I'll do one of the stupid jokes from yesterday. How many Star Trek fans does it take to screw in a light bulb? Don't tell me. 4. 1 to screw it in, and 3 to discuss how much better it was done on the original series. Thank you. And that's the second time you laughed at that. That's how good you are. Some brief biographical information about our next guest, John Lancie. John was born in a crossfire hurricane. In the cold and driving rain. No, wait a minute. Here, sorry. Please allow me to introduce himself. He's a man of style and grace. He's been around a long... No, John is a very dear friend of mine. You all know how wonderful he is, all the wonderful roles he's played. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce first our moderator, Diana Botsford, and John Lancie.
Good morning.
Good morning,
everybody.
Good morning.
Welcome to Sunday. Are we
Yeah.
recovered? Are we here? Are we awake? So, John, I got to tell you, in researching your work, over 150 different roles in the course of your acting career. Are you in competition for the hardest working actor in the industry, or?
Well, that's you went on IMDb.
Amongst other places,
Yeah.
yes. It's all online.
So that was a question? Okay. I think actually there are more than that, and it's not about bragging. It's about the fact that IMDb usually only, has film roles on it. So when you do go up there, understand that there's usually, it doesn't include theater, it doesn't include music, it doesn't include anything other than the screen. So, but go on, please.
No, I mean, as you are literally one of the hardest working actors.
No, actors never think that they're working enough. Actors never think that they work enough. So I take exception with that. I should be working more.
So when did you discover you wanted to act?
Oh, I had for those of you who are younger in the audience, I'm actually speaking to you. I flunked out of school twice. I had a terrible time learning how to read. And when I was going to school, and I went into a school that was a private school in Philadelphia, and it was a very hotsy-totsy school, and they made no compunctions about which, if you were in a grade, there was whatever grade, 3rd grade, 1, 2, and 3 Form 1, 2, and 3. Form 1 were all the smart kids. Form 2 were the lesser, and Form 3 were the dummies. I mean, right off the bat, they don't do it that way anymore. And I went into that school in whatever, kindergarten or whatever, 1st grade, and I was in Form 1. And by the 5th grade or 6th grade, all of us who were in Form 1 in that school, who had moved along, were all now in Form 3. Because we were taught a new way to read. And it didn't work. And it didn't work. Just a little, you can hear me, right? Yes, okay. And back then, what they would end up saying is that nobody thought to say, well, there was something wrong with the school. What happened is that by that time, you just began to think of yourself as a dummy. And I went then to yet another school. And this was an end-of-the-line school, essentially. It was still a private school, but it was a little tiny private school which had a lot of kids like me. We were told that if we did not make it there, it would be military school. And which was the big, the big punishment that all of us were facing. And I was 14 then, and so I had a pretty dismal experience in school up until that point. And we had a wonderful teacher, and this was my first year there, and we had a wonderful teacher who would come in and say, and there were 19 of us in my graduating class, so it's really a small school. Who would come in and say, okay, we're going to do Mozart's Marriage of Figaro, and we're going to do all of it. And we go, well, okay, and we would do an opera. We're going to do Handel's Messiah for Christmas, and we're going to do all of it. And that year, there were 3 projects, and that year, in April, I guess, or maybe March, he came in and he said, we're going to do Henry V. And Lancie, and I was talking in the back, and he threw a book at me, and it hit me, and it fell onto the desk. I'm like, what? Like that. He said, we're doing Henry V, and you're going to play Hal.
Oh, yes.
I had no idea what that meant or anything. So I worked hard to read it, and I worked harder to memorize it. And I was very fortunate to the extent that when I performed it, there was a grandfather who had come to see his granddaughter. And he happened to be the editor of the Pelican Shakespeares. I don't know if any of you in school, there's still these, the little book of Shakespeare or is the Pelican edition. And he went, after the performance, he went up to my father and he said, if your son has any interest, you should encourage him because he has a flair for this. And that was the first time I had ever been good at school. And I grabbed onto that like a life preserver.
That's actually my favorite of all the Shakespeare plays.
It's a great,
funny.
it's a fun,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Yes, I do, but you're not going to hear it.
Now, one of the other things that I read in your bio is that you were at Kent State during the shooting, and you were there for the shooting. That really put me back on my heels. You might be aware of the Kent State shooting, 1970?
1970, May 4th, 1970. Wow. Yes, I was there. As a matter of fact, the reason I ended up going to Kent State is because even though I might have been doing pretty well in my acting at school, I really never was much of an academic. And so I just didn't have many choices to go to college. And one of the things is that Kent State had a program that they had 6 theaters that were running all the time.
Wow.
And I was really fortunate, and they had a graduate program in which you would end up going out on tour. And I auditioned for that, and they accepted me as an undergraduate into the graduate program, into that tour at least, not the graduate program, but into that tour. So I was off on tour, and it was great, a great tour. We traveled all around the state of Ohio. We would teach classes in the morning. We'd do a one-act play in the afternoon, and then a major play that night. And we were in each town for a period of 1 week. And we were called back to campus. There was, a little bit of unrest back at campus. And we were called back to campus on a Friday, which was one day early. So I watched the ROTC building get burned down on Saturday. And on Sunday, martial law was declared. And on Monday, there was the line where the National Guard was here and all of the students were here, not all of them, but some of us were here. And it was sort of a game, you know, they would throw, they would shoot a tear gas, we would throw it back and what have you. And then all of a sudden, I'm not going to go through the whole story, but all of a sudden there was the shooting. And I ended up taking that. I went on the march to Washington, and this is something that just doesn't exist anymore. While I was on the march, which was a huge, huge march, it was a protest against going into Cambodia, I said, you know, I'm just kind of like a teardrop, a little drop of rain in this big march. I think that I should talk to my senator. I went to a phone book and looked up my senator's name and his address.
Good for you.
And
That's
it doesn't happen anymore. And I knocked on his door, and somebody answered, and I said, my name is John Lancie. I was at Kent State University, and I would like to speak to Senator Young because I think that he needs to understand exactly what took place there, because I was there and I can give him what the layout was like. He said, door closed, door opened again, come in, how do you do? And he said, sit down, young man, and I'll never forget, he said, what can I serve you to drink? I said, I'll like to have a bourbon on the rocks. And I'll never forget, it came in the most beautiful crystal goblet.
Yeah.
And I told him the entire story, and he said, I think that you need to speak to Ted Kennedy. So I'm going to send you down to the Senate. But before you do that, you need a white shirt. He said, what size are you? And he said, I think we're about the same size. And he told his guy to go upstairs, and then he gave me a white shirt. And I went and I talked to Ted Kennedy, and Ted Kennedy said, I think you need to tell this story to the Senate. I went out on the Senate floor and told the story in truncated, 25 words or less, to the Senate floor. And then he said, well, you've done very well, young man. And I said, well, no, you don't understand. I need to speak to the president. So then he said, well, I can get you into the White House, but I don't know if you'll speak to the president. And I had an appointment at the White House, and who did they have me talk to? But a kid, frankly, maybe a year or two older than I was, like an intern. Except he reminded me of all the kids that did really well in school.
The ones.
So I had an immediate antipathy. So he said, well, why don't you tell me your story? And I went, hey, you know what? I didn't come all this way to talk to you. I want to talk to your superior. And he was like, well. And I'm a good enough actor to be able to act arrogant. And he left the office, and I started walking around the White House. I started walking around the West Wing, and I was more attractive than I am now, certainly. And the secretaries were like, who are you? And I made my way all the way into Halderman's office and sat down, and he said, okay, and he brought in about 5 or 6 other people, and I told him the story. He said, very well. And I said, now I'd like to speak to the president. And he said, in a way that I knew, he said, young man, you have done very, very well. You're not going to speak to the president, but he will hear about this. And that was my Kent State.
Thank you. That is. In this day and age, for those of you who are in social media, everybody likes to go online and kvetch about all the latest social issues, but no one takes the time to do what you did, to personally call the senator, write the letter.
Well, a lot of people do, and I have not maintained that type of activism at all. I'm just amazed that you could go It's just would be unheard of now that you could go to the phone book and find the senators, knock on the door. Yeah, come on in, Well, go ahead, next question.
But it's a different era, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
still an incredible story. Thank you.
You had to try to find a phone book, right?
Yep, absolutely. Phone books, what's that? We cut those all in half. So the title we had put together for this was Tricksters, Shadows, and Shapeshifters. And that certainly applies to your very memorable television roles that you've done. Let's talk about some of the exceptions to that role. For instance, Bartok in Legend, a little bit of a Nikolai Tesla.
Sure, Bartok
Yeah.
and Legend, right?
Yeah.
Certainly
Some other
the
roles.
Breaking Bad, just of late.
Yeah.
Lots of plays. In theater, I usually play the lead, which is essentially the hero, or close to it.
Never done Macbeth, huh?
No, I haven't done Macbeth, right? But in film or TV, I don't. Right.
So you play more of the trickster. For those of you unfamiliar, it's an archetype. Think the coyote, the Native American coyote, Loki from mythology. All sorts of tricksters are out there. For you with Q, which is really where you were raised to this international awareness as far as this kind of role, out of all of the different tricksters in mythology, who would you say you the most identify with? The music cue is perfect timing.
I don't know. I mean, I didn't think of, certainly, I didn't think of that role in that way. What I did think of that role in, I had played before that Byron, and I played Amundsen, the explorer who got to the South Pole first. So I sort of brought those two elements into Q. Byron, in that he was his wife, who divorced him, said he was a huge figure he was sort of like the Kennedys and the Beatles rolled into one. I mean, he was a huge, huge celebrity in his time, in his brief time. And his wife said that he was mad, bad, and dangerous to know. And I thought, oh, that would be good to bring in, to roll into that character. And then also in Amundsen's case, there was a ruthlessness about Amundsen, which I really admired.
The South Pole Explorer.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. In fact, just 2 days ago, we did a panel on Antarctica, and the reason why he really survived and made it to the pole in front instead of Scott is that he did the research with the Eskimos.
Right.
And he realized he would have to be willing to eat seal's brains in order to not get scurvy.
Yeah.
And Scott had a problem with that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he ate his dogs, which was the other part that everybody was all upset with. I mean, he showed the difference between the romantic notion of getting a job done, and in this case, dying in the process, which was Scott, and his notion, which was just a much more efficient, pragmatic way of getting a job done. Although, when he found out that Scott had died, he said, well, he will surpass me in his death. He will surpass me in fame, because everybody will remember him and not that I was the one who did this. So.
Looking back over your career, having done so many extraordinary characters, and we're going to open the floor here in just a moment to questions, because I know you have a lot, but Q is obviously stuck with everybody. Q he's not the good guy, he's not the bad guy, he really is his own guy, but at the end of every episode that he's done, that you've done, you realize that in the end, he's actually shook things up for the better. So for you, coming into that role from the beginning, did you expect Q to become so indelible in the pop culture and internationally?
No, no. It, it was I mean, for those, I know that you've all, most of you have heard this story, but I guess it's worth showing how capricious our business is, in my case, my even doing the role and what have you. I was playing Amundsen at the Taper. I was in rehearsals. I got a call. My agent said, you have an audition tomorrow, 4:30, for Star Trek. I said, well, I thought they already did Star Trek. She said, yeah, but they're doing it again, and it must be a typo. It's just a letter Q. I said, yeah, but I'm in rehearsals. I didn't go to that audition because I was in rehearsals. You don't just leave a job to, I mean, if you can, you try to, but I just didn't. It wasn't like I'd all my life wanted to be in Star Trek or anything like that. I had a co-lead, I mean, the big role in Amundsen, in Terra Nova, and I just didn't go. About a week later, my agents called me back and said, you didn't go. And I said, no, I'm in rehearsals. Well, this producer keeps on calling for you, and please try to make it. I said, if you can make it at my lunchtime, I'll be able to go. I went there, I did my audition. I prepped it the night before. I revved it up for 15 minutes while I was waiting. I went in, I did it, and a guy walks out behind me as I leave the door, and he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he says, you make my words sound better than they are.
Roddenberry?
And I said, oh, well, you must be the writer. And he said, I'm Gene Roddenberry.
Oh, my God. Who's that?
Whatever. I keep the lights on again.
Yeah, we
that
want
would
to
be
see the
much
people.
nicer.
There they are.
Yeah, there we go.
There they are.
And then I had to get going. I mean, like I only had an hour to be able to go to do the, go from the Taper up to Paramount and go to do the audition and go back. So I'm like, okay, great. And then another guy stopped and he said, I think we're going to be seeing more of you, which is like, oh, please.
You've heard it all before.
I heard it all. Yeah. Then another guy stops me and he says, this, really as I'm now moving out of the trailer, he says, I'm the guy who's been calling for you, and this is...
Lights up, please. Thank you.
And this is a payback. And I said, what do you mean, a payback? He said, well, about 4 or 5 or 6 years before, I was laying on my back in the hospital, and during the day, with a quadruple bypass operation, and during the day, and I knew he was going. I was watching you on Days of Our Lives. And you made me laugh when I thought I was going to die. So he said, they're going to hire you. I said, oh, great. I said, when's the show? When are you shooting? And he gave me a date, and I went, no, that's not going to work for me. I'm sorry. I'm in this other show, and I'm in Japan. And I don't really know what my last day is, but that's where I'm leaving. I'm leaving in a week to go to Japan. And he said, you need to get out of that show because this is really going to be a big deal for you. And you need to do that. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. It's in 6 weeks you're going to be shooting, correct? Yes. Right. Now, and this is a better show than the show I'm in, right? Yeah. Well, I mean, I won't say it's better, but it's going to be one. I said, well, let me ask you this. What if in the next 6 weeks, what if I take your show, but in the next 6 weeks, I get a better show than yours? So am I supposed to leave your show? He goes, well, no. I said, I can't do that. Well, and I can't do it.
Absolutely.
And also I wasn't going to try. So they changed the shooting date.
Wow.
They said, we were going to hire you for a month. We'll hire you for 2 weeks, but you have to be back on Monday at 6 a.m. to start shooting. By this time, I'm at home. It's been 3 or 4 days of talking back and forth, and I now know that my last day of shoot of Terra Nova is in Tokyo, and my last show is Sunday. And
It's a
I like,
17-hour flight, isn't it?
yeah, it's some crazy flight.
Yeah.
And I went, oh, okay. And my wife was sort of half listening and what have you, and I said, it's not going to work. And she was overhearing the thing. And she said, no. I said, what? What? International Dateline. So I finished the show. It was a matinee on Sunday. I got to the airport at 6 o'clock. I do not still know exactly how I left at 6 o'clock on Sunday and arrived on Saturday. But I was on the set at 6 in the morning on Monday, and that's how I did the show. Otherwise, there would have been somebody else would have been Q, that's for sure.
So there's a little sci-fi working in your order. That's great. Shall we open the floor to questions? Questions?
Yes. Yeah.
We have a microphone here if you feel the need.
Oh, you can just, big voice.
I got a question. Whoa, kind of loud. Sorry. Well, I got a couple of questions. Number one, how did you get cast with the role of Discord? And number two, how long did it take to do the Brony documentary that you worked on?
Okay, I got cast in the role of Discord because my agent called me up. Do you guys know about Bronies and Discord? Okay, I didn't know anything about this. Anything. I got a call. My agent said, you have an offer to do, and I wanted to know if you're interested. The is usually how I hear names of things. And I asked the 3 questions that actors ask. I need to read the script. When? How much? Yeah. The classic thing for actors is the script, the location, the money. You have to get 2 of the 3. Okay? If the money isn't any good, maybe it's a really great script and the location is fabulous. Or, you can do combinations, but you want 2 of the 3. This is classic, sort of. So I said, fine. They sent me the script. I read about 3 pages. I went, oh, I can tell very quickly whether it's well written or not. And I went, oh, this is very well written, and blah, blah, blah. It's fine, done. I went, did it, and, I spent a couple of hours the night before preparing it. I went and did it. Probably didn't take more than about an hour and a half or 2. Completely forgot about it. Any of you who were in that panel yesterday, which I still apologize, like for Stargate, completely forget about it. Okay? It's now in somebody else's hands. You never know when it's going to come out. Blah 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 blah. 3 months later, I go down to my computer. I open it up. 400 emails in my email box. I'm like, God, I've been spammed. I begin reading them, and they're all saying My Little Pony. And I call up to my wife. I go, what do you know about My Little Pony? And she said, well, you recorded it about 3 months ago. And it's a cartoon for little girls. I said, well, let me tell you something. These are not little girls And that was my introduction.
So comparing the Star Trek fandom to Little Pony, what?
I'll continue the full answer on this because actually I want you to see this documentary. I think it's well done and really worth it. A friend of mine came to dinner, just happened to come to dinner. Mike Brokoff, wonderful guy. I've known him for 20 years. He is a producer for reality television shows. Now I'm telling him the story, and we're kind of like going, like that. And he said, hey, you want to do a documentary? I went, I'm not touching this with a 10-foot pole. And that was it. And I went up to Canada to do a job. And then a bunch of guys came up to me. They go, hi, how are you? You know, Mr. Lancie, would you sign, you know, for Discord? And I go, yeah, wait a minute. You watch My Little Pony. Why do you watch My Little Pony?
Good question.
So I began to bore in a little bit. And I discovered something. They're very polite people. They're very smart, very involved in a show that I went, well, what is the show about? You know, I've done one episode, so I didn't really know. Oh, well, it's about, you know, the elements of harmony and stuff like that. So I'm going, oh, well, this is very nice. I was up there for 2 weeks, and people kept on coming to me in restaurants and what have you. So, and I'm beginning to go, isn't this interesting? This is like the beginning, the genesis, just the spark of a new fan base. This is sort of interesting.
Different.
And it's very different, and it really blurs the whole notion of you know, pink and blue and all that type of stuff. I mean, this is all very interesting. But that's all I was thinking about it. Then my friend, though, Mike Brokoff, said, I think you need to see something. So he said, I'm going to send you this. So he sent me a URL, and it was a compilation of Fox News. I'm going to be very straight with you. I think Fox News has done more to pervert the truth in this country than just about anywhere else. And it said, Bronies, the latest in the cultural, you know, whatever, blah, blah, blah. There are a bunch of homosexuals who live at home on food stamps and disability so as to be able to watch cartoons in their parents' basement every day. And what would you rather have as a son? Would you like him to do this, or maybe, wouldn't it be maybe better to be a terrorist? And I'm like, my God. You know, it's not my cup of tea. I mean, I'm not going to watch My Little Pony. I watched it. Actually, I know a lot of the episodes because I watched it from a business point of view, from an exploration and an interest point of view. But it's not my cup of tea. But I'm not going to completely disparage and make fun of a group that does watch it. That just doesn't seem right to me. So I then called Mike and I went, let's do this documentary. Let's do this documentary because these people need protection. They need cover before they are identified as what these news organizations are willing to do, as entertainment. You see, it's not news, it's just entertainment. And what could be more entertaining than making fun of somebody? So then I said, how are we going to fund this? He said, well, I'd like to go through Kickstarter. I said, okay, I don't know anything about Kickstarter. Fine, $60,000. Now, I do know about what it costs to put things on. And I went, wow, Mike, do you really think that you can do this for 60? He said, it's going to be very difficult. But yes, I think I can. You know, 2 cameras, 1 event like this, 6 weeks of post, we'll be able to do it. Okay. We got something like 320,000. Which really made me nervous. Yeah, because I'm going, I don't know anything about this subject. And there are people out there who really think that, oh my God, what are we going to do? Well, we began to think, okay, right off the bat, we said, look, we have 1 concentric circle. Well, let's put 2 and 3 and 4. Let's put everything into the piece. So we went to Israel, we went to Germany, we went to England, we went all around America, and we kept on finding more and more and more things to be interested in. Of course, it was a double-edged sword, because as you're doing that, you're going from what would be like 3 months of work to ultimately 12 months of work. And it became a lot of work. It just became so much work. But the film is done now. I think I've had a lot of friends who know nothing about this, who go through the exact same experience that I did, which is the way in which Mike and I framed the documentary. Why are 20-year-old guys watching a cartoon intended for 10-year-old girls? And why does society have such a difficulty with that? Okay? And that's had to be what the documentary was about. And I had friends, you know, they're doctors and lawyers and they go, yes, we understand that, you know, and sometimes I'll go, you have to come over to the house, you have to watch this documentary. And what's it about? Well, it's about these bronies. Well, what are bronies? Brownies? No, bronies. Bronies. Well, what's a brony? It's a 20-year-old guy who watches a cartoon intended for 10-year-old girls. Oh! And they watch the documentary, and they all go, oh my God. I thought it was going to be a journey that I watched here. And actually, the journey was here. I was pulled and pushed through the entire time going, yes, where am I with this? I don't know. No, it seems to be okay. And so I'm very pleased with the results.
That's the great hallmark of a great documentary.
Yeah.
That's excellent. Very excellent.
Yes. Yes.
On behalf of, I don't need it. On behalf of people
I'll repeat it.
there who, for one reason or another, have been terribly misunderstood, thank you.
Oh, you're. For those of you who didn't hear, on behalf of people everywhere who have been misunderstood, thank you. Yes.
So would you say you're...
Really loud.
What's your personal opinion
Not too loud.
personal opinion on the Brony fandom? Is it a positive one, a negative one? Your encounters with the fandom, influences?
My personal experience, in other words, when I meet you, okay, has been exemplary. Okay. I'm not sure what part of the fandom is anonymous behind the anonymous behind the computer, you know, where it's an anonymous reaction. I don't think that those are the bronies. Those are not the bronies that I know. So there seems to be a split. Once the documentary was out, we got a fair amount of negative response from people who said, well, I'm a brony, and I don't agree with this. I mean, why would you have somebody who has Asperger's up there? I go, well, because if you watch their story, I think it's a fantastic story, an unbelievable story as to what a fandom can do. And what finding community can do, and what being inclusive can do, and all that type of stuff. So, you know, so this is the documentary that we wanted to put together, and hopefully it's certainly Brony 101, but for the vast majority of the people in the world, it's already a big step into like, what? So we're taking them there. If you want to go and create another more explicit a more explicit documentary going down other avenues, that's up to you. Okay. Yes. Yes. You mean Q?
You can reach for that ageless quality.
No. Yes.
Imagine how fun it would be to play a trickster like Q or like Discord. What is your least favorite part of playing Trickster?
Oh, good question. What was your least favorite part to play?
Just learning the lines. Learning lines is really difficult for me. If you're really good at it, then television is really your medium. Because as far as they're concerned, you're a brilliant actor if you got it on the first take. It doesn't matter what they got, but if they got it on the first take and all the lines were right, they're like, let's move on. Most of the stuff that I had to do was it had such velocity and spin that you just needed to be really what's the word? In touch with those lines. They could not be up here. You couldn't be thinking about them. They had to be down here. So I don't have anything that about playing a trickster that I would not like to do, I don't think. But it is a little more difficult. It's like being Mercutio.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Very good comparison.
Yes, and I've played Romeo, not of late, but I did play Romeo twice. And I'll tell you, for any actor who plays Romeo, when Mercutio dies, you kind of go, oh my God. Now comes the heavy lifting and I have to do it. Yes, in the back, one of you. A what?
I didn't hear that.
Can we get a what? Red alerts?
When you would annoy Captain Picard
but I don't
or
say,
Cisco
do
or
I say
Voyager.
red alert?
There's a couple of times where you would appear. You appeared in so many different costumes on that show, but there were a few times you impersonated an officer.
All of them came from home.
That's why they fit so well.
That's right.
Uh-huh.
Now I forgot what your first question was. What was it?
Favorite role and why?
Oh, I think to this day, my favorite role was Jack Tanner in Man and Superman. None of you saw it. It's Bernard Shaw's great play. It's also sort of the Everest for an actor. It runs about 4 hours. My wife and I did it down at South Coast, which is a wonderful theater, and it was both an achievement for me to learn all of that stuff because it was so difficult, and then to play it was great. And the reason I enjoyed it is because everything that I said, recited, I believed it. And there were times when I was saying it, I was going, never in a million years could I have put this so well, and yet I get to say exactly what I wish I could say in real life, like that. So it was great fun. All right, another one. Yes. Yes. The question was about essentially my work with symphony orchestras. I was involved with, and still am involved with LA Theater Works, which is a producing arm for NPR, the plays a thing, and their radio shows. I don't know, the LA Phil had, somebody dropped out, I'm not sure what the story is, and I jumped in and I did Peer Gynt. And what's really nice in the music business is that if you do something and you do it well, then they keep on hiring you, as opposed to the acting business, where if you do something nice, that they either don't hire you ever again, or they ask you to come in and audition for the new role. So I began doing at a really high level. I mean, the next one, that was the LA Phil, then I went to the New York Philharmonic, and then I did 3 or 4 shows for them, and then up in Montreal and Philadelphia and Cleveland and Chicago, and I mean all the major orchestras. And as I was beginning to do these narrations, I said, you know, we could go so much further. So I began to plump up the narrations. Then I began to create whole events. Let's say, take Mendelssohn's Midsummer Night's Dream, bring the text back in. It was originally written with incidental music, so as incidental music. So I brought the text back in, and then I turned it into a 90-minute show where you heard the music and watched watched 90 minutes of Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. For Romeo and Juliet, if you strip, nobody's really interested in it. If you talk about Romeo and Juliet, the only people you're really interested in are Romeo and Juliet, and there are only 2 plot points that are necessary: the death of Tybalt and the drinking of the poison. So I refashioned that, got dancers in to do a lot of the action, and I used 11 different composers who have dealt with Romeo and Juliet. So you have Prokofiev and Tchaikovsky and Gounod and Berlioz, but you also have, Henze and these other people. These shows then began to become popular. I did them in Ravinia at the big outdoor thing there. Bourgeois Gentlemen and blah, 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 blah. So a bunch of those. Then I was hired to create what I consider to be didactic pieces, which is called under a heading of First Nights. What would it be like to have been at the opening of the Rite of Spring in Paris with the Diaghilev company and what have you? So I created that, and then Mahler and Prokofiev, and so I did that for a period of time. And the last thing that I did was, I think the last thing I did, I don't remember.
But you have a long history of classical music.
Yeah,
you were
yeah.
born and bred into it. Your
Right.
father was
My
in the
father was with
symphony.
the Philadelphia Orchestra, and was the Sneetches. A new piece has been written on about the Sneetches, which I was very interested in because it's about tolerance. Those of you who know the Sneetches, it's about, there are the Sneetches with stars on their bellies, and the ones that have none, and the ones who have none feel that they don't have, and it goes back and forth, and it's a wonderful show. So I just did a recording of that. Yeah. Okay.
Next question. We have time for 2 questions if they're short.
Yes, ma'am. How did I feel about working with my son? With Keegan, my older son, who is now in the State Department, was hired to play my son, Voyager. It was, in fact, not nepotism. They did not come to me first. My agent was the one who said, oh, I see on the breakdowns that they get every day that they are actually casting for somebody to play your son. Do you think that Keegan would like to do it? So it was my agent's idea. I can't say that I enjoyed it. And the reason is this: wasn't that anything bad had happened, but an actor comes in with their performance, with what they want to do, and what have you, ready to go. They need their concentration on themselves, and for the ability to interact. so you're sort of playing tennis with the other person. If the other person is somebody who, let's say something's happened to them, they've hurt their ankle, and you're dealing with them, and that becomes part of the performance. You are performing with them, but you also know that they've hurt their ankle, or something has happened in their family, and you could see that there's a vulnerability about that. You are lending yourself to that, and yet at the same time you're not giving away your performance, because your job is to present your performance, not like, well, when at least I, who had never done this with my sons before, almost my entire concentration was on how is he doing? What's this experience like for him? Which was not what the character of Q is about at all. So while I think that he did a wonderful job, and every day was more full and better for him, and on and on and on, it was a little, I was on tenterhooks most of that time, and I don't think that I did perhaps my best work, because I was just concerned about him.
Nervous
so
dad.
that's
We have one gentleman
Yeah.
down here.
Yeah, yeah.
Last
Okay.
question.
I'm sorry to be long-winded about these stories, but you're bringing up things that actually have an opportunity to say other things. How did I like it? Oh, it was really nice, and that would be the end of it. But
This is your wrap-up, so go for it.
okay, I went to do my MacGyver. Yeah, the problem with these television shows, for the most part, is that you spend very little time on them, and whatever. So you kind of come to try to do something well. The director, I went to the director, and I said, oh, thank you for having me, and blah, blah, blah. Listen, I just want you to know, I'm sure you know this, but there are holes in the material that just, he goes, oh, please. Don't even start. I know. We just have to suffer through this and do it. Oh, okay, I better not say anything. Well, a couple of weeks later, I got a call from my agents. They need you at Paramount. They're going to put you up against a brick wall. They want you to learn these lines, and they're going to shoot them in different positions, and they essentially explain the script. So someone finally went, well, this thing doesn't make any sense. So I'm there doing it, and I had one of the most interesting experiences in my television work. The guy, and I forget his name now, the guy who came out was the producer of MacGyver at the time. He had been brought in that year.
Michael Piller?
No, no. And he was genuinely upset that I was there, and he was an older man and genuinely apologizing. And then he went into a monologue, which was one of the most interesting monologues that I've heard. Do you know that I was the producer for Gunsmoke? The days have changed so much. They asked me to come back and do this, and I said, okay, but boy, am I upset about it. When we were doing Gunsmoke, we had the scripts before the season started shooting. We had 26 scripts. They were polished and ready to go. And I could go, oh, this one has comedy in it. Bob would be good for that as a director. Let's give it to him, and stuff like that. Now, we don't even know whether we're going to be picked up 6 weeks beforehand. We don't even know this. We don't even know that. And he got himself really emotional about it and really upset until I was going, no, it's all right. No, it's really, it's okay. It's okay. I know things change, like that. So that was my experience of MacGyver. I don't have if you put a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you what I did in it or something. But I remember that experience of a man who had wanted, a producer who had, at one point in his career, had done something which was quite significant and now had been brought back. The industry has changed so much since that time, and it's changed since I got started. Many of us are just kind of going, I don't need to put up with this shit anymore. Because it's just changed so much. So that was that. One more question. Okay, now, you know what? We'll play a little game. The person will ask the question. If you all want me to answer the question, you go, yeah, I'll clap. But if you think it's a crappy question, you can say boo. Oh, you're ready to go? Go for it.
Okay, my question is this. I feel like many of us find you as a transcendent figure as Q in Star Trek. In terms of the rest, what do you find transcendent that was difficult for you to take in?
He knew, paid attention. Give the man a star.
Man, he's your Ed McMahon. I'm not quite sure I understand the
Duress?
question.
What was difficult for you to learn that in the end helped transform you from the wall?
Beyond the lines, just learning the lines
In Star Trek?
No, in life.
in life. What did you get out of performing the role that maybe informed your life? Okay. Sorry.
You know what? I'll answer that privately. But I think it's a good question. I'm just not quite sure exactly to be specific. Otherwise, one more.
A young
Okay.
man in the front left.
Okay.
Very young man.
Oh, yes. Some questions are actually too good. Did I ever
Didn't hear the question.
did I ever get bullied in school? And if I did, what advice do I have?
I was waiting for your answer.
Wow. Boy, I really want to give you a great answer. The first part of the question, did I ever get bullied? The answer is yes. Yes, I did. I was not very good in sports, and I think I was just sort of behind the eight ball in a lot of things. I think perhaps my humor I developed my sense of humor as a way to push back, okay? Until finally people would sort of stay away from me because I was
Unpredictable.
I was a smart aleck. I had a smart mouth, yeah, which also got me into trouble. Now, both with my teachers and my friends. I don't have a great answer for you as to what to do about it. I can tell you this, though, is that I happen to be of the feeling that the more difficulties you have early, so if you're getting bullied and having a hard time at school and stuff like that, the more you are knocked off your horse, the question then becomes is how quickly you get back on the horse. And just keep going. You just keep going. And
Lion in winter.
and know that these things actually create character and create these problems that one has are actually the things that make us interesting, okay? So I wouldn't consider them as being perhaps as oh so terrible. In the moment they might feel that way, but as time goes on, they're going to make you stronger. but that's sort of a big philosophical answer to probably a question that you want to answer differently. I'm sorry.
No, but it's a great answer.
All right, thank you very much.
Wonderful.